in telling that story?
It's actually, it was about a year ago. I was listening to a podcast from the States called Reveal, and it's by the Center for Investigative Journalism. And a journalist there, his name's Trey Bundy, had been researching the cases of sexual abuse by Jehovah's Witnesses in the U.S. for 3 years, I believe, at that point. And so he had done a podcast about the issue, and I was shocked. Like, I had never heard of this. I had no idea that this was an issue, and I immediately wondered what's happening in Canada. And so I started doing some digging and discovered that, Australia was conducting the Royal Commission. There's a charity commission in the UK that was also investigating the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I couldn't find anything happening in Canada at the time.
Have you since?
Well, that's nothing official other than the class action suits. There isn't any it doesn't seem to be any government investigation, because the Royal Commission in Australia and the UK Charity Commission would be similar to an inquiry here, I believe. And there's nothing on the radar that I have found that, indicating the government would be investigating the Jehovah's Witnesses.
So you spoke to a number of survivors of abuse for your article. When you were speaking to them, what was their overall mood? What was their emotion in regards to this subject?
Oh, very complex. I think mostly they wanted to be heard. I think one of the themes that ran through each of their interviews was they'd been silenced for so long as children and as adults, and they really were looking to be believed and heard. And mostly they wanted to use their stories to try to protect any more children from being hurt, whether within the organization or outside of it.
Were they pretty forthcoming when you were talking to them about this?
About what happened to them?
Right.
Very, yeah. They were, it was not easy conversations, that's for sure. Yeah. It was, as an interviewer, you definitely, you try not to internalize too much, but it definitely affects you.
Yeah. What was your response when you approached the organization, the Watchtower organization?
What response? Oh, they were, very quick to respond by email. They promised they would get a response. I asked for an interview. They preferred that I send them questions, so I didn't really have an option to do an interview, unfortunately. And I gave them a deadline, and they met it right to like 5 p.m. I think it was on a Friday, so it was right to the minute. And it was, it was very, they really did feel like they couldn't respond to a lot of my questions around how the organization handles child sex assault cases, how they're responding to the class action suits that have been filed, just a lot of those questions I outlined in my article. They didn't feel that they could respond to those in light of the class action suits. So it was very standard PR answers, it seemed.
What did they tell you?
They did tell me that they that they do not protect abusers. That they, let me try to remember now. It was very carefully worded, and because it's a very complex organization. That's another thing. Is the more I got into this, the more I realized just how complicated the rules and regulations are, and so their response to me was very carefully worded. But yes, they deny protecting pedophiles. They do say that child abuse or child sexual abuse is the most abhorrent act, and that they wouldn't, basically that they wouldn't protect abusers.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any sense of how widespread this issue is?
Officially we can only really go on the Australia case, the Australia Royal Commission, because they did have, one thing that the Royal Commission did confirm is that Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia anyway, and we believe that it's a worldwide. Mark the Elder did tell me that they also did this in Canada, where they do record any accusations of childhood sexual abuse within the organization. And the Australia Commission confirmed that, because the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia did release over 1,000 reports of members being accused of sexually abusing children. So there are records of that in Australia, and so I think it was 30 years. In 30 years, 1,000. I think it was 1,004 members were accused of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. And then when you compare that to the Canadian population, it's likely, if it was to be apples to apples, it would likely be a lot higher here.
Yeah. What did you learn in terms of the organization, and what did you hear from the survivors in terms of what makes it difficult for them to see justice?
Oh, again, it's so complicated. It's like one thing after another, between the two-witness rule, which the Jehovah's Witnesses require for a survivor to be believed in any accusation of any misdoing or quote-unquote sin, would be for there to be two witnesses. And so the victim or the survivor is one witness, and then they require a second witness. And so, as most people realize, in cases of childhood sexual abuse, the perpetrator's not doing that in public. It's a very private offense. And so the other witness would be the abuser. So if the abuser denies the sexual abuse, doing the sexual abuse, and there's no other witness, then automatically the abuser is considered innocent. And so this really puts the victims at a disadvantage, especially children, if they're coming forward with these abuse cases. There's also, in the past, victims have had to come forward and state their accusations in front of their abuser. And so the Royal Commission really outlined how that is really traumatizing for the victims, and very, very difficult for them to be able to sit in a room with two elders who are always male and their abuser and go into great detail about what happened. So those are two of the biggest barriers. And then when I was speaking to a lot of the survivors, if they went to the elders, or if their parents went to the elders, or a friend of the family went to the elders, a lot of the time it didn't even get past that. It was just dismissed. It was, they were told to be quiet about it and not bring shame on Jehovah's name. So it didn't even get to the point of what they call a judicial committee, which is when they would investigate these cases.
Did you get any sense, talking to the survivors, what they would ultimately like to see?
Change. Change. They just want change to the process. They want, that's all they want is change. They want they want the abusers to be, the one thing that the Royal Commission revealed was that not over 1,000 cases was reported to the police or to child services. And so the survivors that I talked to, basically, they would want all of these cases to be brought forward to investigating officers, for them to be investigated. They would want, children to be believed. They would want a much different process in how these children come forward. They would like to see the abusers, dealt with properly, and not basically so many of them still walking the halls of their kingdom halls, which is their churches.
How long did you work on this story?
It was a year. It was a full year.
Well, so a lot of stones turned over in your work.
And a lot of developments during that year, like with the Royal Commission, their findings came out within that year. A lot of the class actions were officially filed. 2 of the class actions were officially filed. There's a couple other lawyers also looking at filing other class actions. I know of at least 2 more in Canada.
Well, so you started with very little then?
Very little, yeah. When I first reached out to, it's quite incredible though. If you start digging, when you just even do an initial search, a lot of the people who have survived sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses are finding other ways of going public and sharing their stories and trying to, get the news out and get the try to increase awareness about this issue. And whether they've posted public videos or they've spoken about it, quite publicly. I really commend them for their courage in doing that. And even Edith, who I spoke with, she protests outside of her Kingdom Hall just to try to increase awareness among the congregants of what's going on.
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.